What's up, everybody? What's the biggest concern for SEC teams ranked in the top 25 heading into next season? We'll tell you why we disagree with some of the thoughts over at ESPN.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com. Get 50% off your first year. All right, I want to dive into this piece we saw on ESPN yesterday, basically talking about all the top 25 teams and what's the biggest area of concern. And they had different writers for ESPN listed what their biggest concern is for each team. Some of them I agree with, but some of them I don't. Some of them I think they're a little bit off base here. I get why the reasoning is on some of this, but let's dive into it. And basically the article says, they took a look at their post-spring power rankings, so the top 25, and they ran through them. And there's a ton of SEC teams in this list, so let's touch on them. They basically, here's the setup. It said, our college football reporters took a look at the biggest area of concern for each of the top teams, the potential Achilles heel, if you will, that could keep each team from reaching their goal for the season. So let's take a look at it. And we start with the Texas Longhorns. And here's what they say. The Longhorns' biggest area of concern, according to ESPN, offensive line. And I tend to agree with this a little bit. They say the Longhorns lost 4 starters on the O-line to the NFL draft. They're breaking in a new quarterback, though Arch Manning did make 2 starts last year. And they're working in new key receivers as well. Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, tight end Gunnar Helm, they're all gone. On the O-line, they lose tackle Kelvin Banks. He was a top 10 pick in the draft. Trevor Gooseby got some playing time last year, particularly in the game where Banks was out. But Longhorns also lost a 56-game starter at center in Jake Majors. They're going to face Ohio State in week 1. So as Dave Wilson writes, that will pose a quick learning curve for an almost completely new offensive line group. So I think this is actually a pretty good, if we're talking about an area of concern, I guess you could maybe for Texas say wide receivers, is Ryan Wingo ready to step up as the guy? DeAndre Moore still there. You bring in, some talented freshmen, Khalil Lockett, Jamie French, Emmett Mosley comes over. I mean, so maybe that could be, I might even slide wide receiver ahead of offensive line as far as just area of concern. It's not that they don't have talent. It's just, are these guys ready to step up and be the premier guys that, that bunch they had last year was in Golden, Bond, et cetera, et cetera. So, but, O-line, look, Cole Hudson, DJ Campbell, Brandon Baker, they got some guys that look ready to go, but, not a bad take on area of concern for Texas going with the offensive line. How about over at Georgia? They say the Georgia Bulldogs lost 6 veteran contributors on their front 7 on defense. None more important than edge rusher. And that's the position, the area of concern they're going with Georgia. And I mean, my goodness, think of Georgia throughout the years. Has pass rush ever been a problem for Georgia? This is Mark Schleybaugh. He says, they had edge rushers, Jalen Walker, Mykel Williams, Chaz Chambliss. Walker and Williams are first-round picks. They all combined for 18 sacks and 28.5 tackles for a loss last year. You make matters worse, Damon Wilson, a projected replacement at edge, he transferred over to Mizzou. So Georgia feels good about Gabe Harris stepping up, and they added a transfer from Army in Elo Madozi, who had 6.5 sacks for the Black Knights last season. I just, look, it could be an area of question, in my opinion, but this is just my opinion. I don't think pass rush is an area of concern for Georgia. In fact, if you really want to go area of concern for Georgia, how about offensive play calling? That's probably what some of the Georgia fans would say. But I think you can even make a case for offensive line for Georgia, having just some concerns. But pass rush, Again, I've had people tell me they think Jordan Hall's going to have a monster year on the interior of that D-line. You got Kristen Miller. I don't know. They're 4 deep at every spot. Inexperienced, yeah, but I wouldn't put that as an area of concern. In fact, I feel like we'll learn what do they open week 1 against Marshall. If they have 6 sacks that week, will we say we're concerned about the pass rush for Georgia? So anyway, that one was pretty interesting. How about over at LSU? Brian Kelly, high expectations. Area of concern for them? Kind of the same with some of these other teams. It's offensive line. And here's what Harry Lyles writes. He said, I don't know that LSU has to necessarily worry about the O-line because of the moves they made this offseason, but it has to be something to keep an eye on just because of the magnitude of the losses. They lost one of the best tackle duos in the country last year, Will Campbell and Emory Jones. They were first and third round picks, respectively. They lost 4 starters across the line in total. DJ Chester and Tyree Adams are back. And they added Braylon Moore from Virginia Tech. We shall see here. They also added Josh Thompson from, I want to say he came in from Northwestern, but Carius Kern is a true freshman that they think could push for some playing time. But Paul Mubenga, Cohen Eccles, those are kind of some of the other guys. I agree with it. I mean, like, look, you're loaded at wide receiver. You got Caden Durham back in the backfield, Trades Green at tight end, Garrett Nussmeier back at quarterback. It's all about that offensive line that will decide if LSU is going to be a playoff team this year. And we saw at times late in the Alabama game, or all throughout the Alabama game, late in the A&M game, Nussmeier was under pressure. Late in the Florida game, just getting sacked left and right. Offensive line will tell the tale of LSU season this year. How about number 9, Alabama? Area of concern for them? They list pass rush. This is from Chris Lowe. He says Alabama finished 13th in the SEC last season in quarterback sacks. And while sacks aren't the end-all, be-all when it comes to rushing the passer, the Tide need to be more consistent in getting to the opposing quarterback. There's not a pure edge pass rusher in the mold of a Will Anderson or Dallas Turner on this roster. Alabama will need to get more pressure from its interior linemen and perhaps a breakout season from some of their young linebackers. But I don't know. LT Overton, some people think could be a big-time playmaker. Tim Keenan is going to SEC Media Days next week for Alabama. I think the hope is one of those guys emerges. I mean, I would agree. Maybe that is the biggest concern for pass rush. I have some questions about the run game. Alabama get back to the old dominant run game they used to have. Jam Miller, Richard Young, who from that group emerges. I wouldn't say it's the biggest area of concern, but I get it. I mean, I'll give you a pass rush for Alabama. Feel pretty good about the secondary. Feel pretty good about the linebackers. How about over at South Carolina? Their biggest concern, defensive front. This is David Hale. He says, what was perhaps South Carolina's biggest strength last season could be its biggest concern. Gone up front are Kyle Kennard, Demetrius Knight, TJ Sanders. Yes, you bring back rising star Dylan Stewart. Brian Thomas. Transfers Gabriel Brownlow Dindy, Devontae Miles. But perhaps the biggest name to know is Fred Johnson, a rangy linebacker who they think is going to blossom in the centerpiece of that defense. So, yeah, I mean, again, a unit that includes Dylan Stewart, I don't know if I'm saying that's my biggest area of concern for the team, but I get what he's saying. The other guys around him. How about in Florida? He say wide receiver. Now, this is one I really disagree with. This is Harry Lyles. He says, one of the reasons Florida is expected to improve this year is because of the talent that DJ Lagway brings. But the Gators' top receivers from last year, Elijah Badger and Chamari DK, left for the NFL. Trey Wilson is back, but coming off a season-ending hip injury. It'll be up to Vernell Brown, Dallas Wilson, Nashawn Montgomery, and J. Michael Sturdivant to help establish themselves. Well, look, I think those guys will. Dallas Wilson, a true freshman, was an absolute stud in the spring game, and I get the spring game, but he caught like 200 yards. He looked like a freak. You don't think he's been working with DJ Lagway, started to build some chemistry? And then our buddy Brandon Olson of Locked On Gators, he is higher than anybody on J. Michael Sturdivant coming from UCLA. He thinks he's going to have a monster year for the Gators. Notice he didn't mention it here. Aiden Mizell, another guy I really like. Hank Hawkins. Lamar Brown's a freshman, Dallas Wilson a freshman, but Trey Wilson, or Eugene Wilson as they call him, but Trey Wilson. I mean, I kind of like the Florida wide receivers. I don't like area concern for Florida. I don't know. I feel pretty good about the secondary. I like the defensive front with Tyreek Sapp, Caleb Banks. Maybe I go O-line for them, but I feel pretty good about that O-line led by Jake Slaughter. Run game solid. I mean, there's a lot to like about Florida. Just the schedule. It's really hurting them. All right, real quick, the three other ones. Texas A&M, they list area of concern wide receiver. Again, I disagree with it. I think Texas A&M did wide receiver was a problem last year. They went and addressed it in the portal. They got Mario Craver from Mississippi State, Casey Concepcion from NC State. They had the kid from Texas Tech, Micah Hudson, and then he reneged and went back in the portal. But Terry Bussey was a true freshman last year going into the sophomore season. I like those three receivers. I think they're going to be just fine for Marcel Reed. Amari Niblack at tight end, see what he's still got left in the tank. So I disagree with that one. How about over at Ole Miss? They say quarterback. And it talks about Austin Simmons, but again, another one, I'm not concerned about Austin Simmons for Ole Miss. I think he's going to be awesome. I think he's going to be just fine. The biggest question for me is how quickly does he progress? Is he super awesome this year? Is he pretty good, has an up and down year, and then next year he's awesome? That's the question for me, but I'm not area of concern. Austin Simmons, I'm not concerned. And then lastly, for Oklahoma, they list tight end. And Chris Lowe says it's been a struggle with tight end for the Sooners, and there's a lot of uncertainty around that spot. Of course, Bauer Sharp left in the portal. He was their leading tight end last year. He's over at LSU now. And they have Caden Helms, Will Huggins, Carson Kent, John Locke. I mean, there's a lot of guys there, several of them coming in through the portal. But, again, I think Oklahoma's got some other concern. To me, the health of the wide receivers, if they're ready to go, good. Offensive line was not good last year for Oklahoma. Is it going to be better with John Mateer there? That, to me, again, I feel like you can go offensive line for just about every school. But to me, I'd go, I'm not too concerned about who Oklahoma's tight end is. I'm more concerned about offensive line, run blocking for Jaden Odd and pass protecting John Mateer. All right, when we return here on Locked On SEC, we'll get you caught up on the latest news going on around the conference. That's coming your way here next. Hey, well, first, I want to remind you guys about our friends at Monarch Money. If you've ever wished managing your money felt easier, go check out our friends at Monarch Money. They will make it easier for you. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch will put you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control of your finances. Monarch Money, more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also going to start building your wealth. Again, you'll be shocked at how much you're spending on things like food delivery services or those streaming services. They are going to find and identify all those and kind of show you the big picture. Here's what you're paying. And if you want to start now, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com. That'll get you 50% off your first year. That's over at monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year. All right, roll along here. Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And we've got some news around the conference that we got to get into. So let's do that as we dive into it. Some news over at Arkansas as first-year Arkansas wide receiver Ismail Cisse, I believe how it's pronounced, Cisse, suffered an injury in the weight room this week, according to the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Timetable for his recovery not currently known, but according to the Democrat Gazette, he broke a bone in his wrist, and he will likely be unavailable when the team starts training camp on August 1st. I mean, let's be real. That's in 3 weeks. He's a redshirt sophomore from Denver, started his career at Stanford, spent 2 seasons there, 14 appearances for them, entered the portal this offseason, joined the Razorbacks in the winter transfer window. Following the spring, looked like he was in line to be one of their starting wide receivers. And they got a lot of new faces there, by the way. If we get to talk to Taylor Green at Media Days, I want to ask him about, man, what's it been like trying to develop chemistry with all these new pieces, from Omega Blake to Cisse, or CC to Raylan Sharp, Courtney Crutchfield. I mean, it's a lot of new faces there in that wide receiver room for the Razorbacks. But CC made 5 starts for Stanford last year, 26 catches, 241 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And like I said, one of 10 additions to that receiver room this offseason. Bobby Petrino went out hunting for a receiver, big-time receivers to add to his weaponry. So we will see the health on CC, but probably, if I'm guessing, I mean, they're saying here, probably not likely to be there when camp starts. Broke a wrist. What's the timetable for that? At least several weeks. So we'll wait for an official word for that. But Arkansas, they open the season August 30th against Alabama A&M. They'll begin SEC play September 13th with a game against Ole Miss on the road. How about some news over at Oklahoma when it comes to tailgating? Oklahoma announcing a big change to their tailgating experience yesterday. The school is going to now allow tailgating on the North Oval for the first time. The area will be free and open to the public on game days. And again, this is for the first time ever. Press release from Oklahoma AD Joe Castiglione said, we knew when we entered the SEC it would just mean more competition, more fierce rivalries, more opportunities to engage with our fans, more ways to show our Sooner spirit. And this year, it means establishing a new tailgate tradition, taking the energy and excitement of game day out to the Oval. It will provide a centralized space for our fans to celebrate their passion, marking the next chapter in a tailgating tradition that will grow stronger each year. According to the release, Oklahoma will have a managed drop-off process for tailgating equipment beginning at 6 p.m. the night before home football games, and will be able to start tailgating 7 a.m. on game days. Their first home game of the season is slated for August 30th against Illinois State. So I asked an Oklahoma buddy of mine about it. He said it's a pretty big deal. Pretty big deal having a dedicated space there for tailgating. And so I've been to Norman. Will be fun to get out there to hopefully see that space being utilized for tailgating. All right, how about some recruiting news? Some big news for LSU yesterday as they landed one of the top-ranked defensive linemen in this class, Lamar Brown. He goes to Baton Rouge University Lab, defensive lineman, and it's right there on LSU's campus. 5-star recruit, top-ranked D lineman in this class, chose from a group of finalists that include Miami, Texas, and A&M. But basically, it was a 2-horse race. I mean, this thing came down to A&M or LSU. 6'4", 285 pounds, consensus 5-star recruit, ranks as the 5th best prospect in this class, according to the composite. And 24/7 Sports reported that Brown was expected to focus on the defensive side of the ball with the Tigers. According to ESPN, A&M made a really strong push. In fact, folks were reporting Thursday that both A&M and LSU coaching staffs felt confident about their position heading into his announcement. But LSU won out. And a massive victory for Brian Kelly and company. Also have another big 5-star in Tristan Keys, one of the top wide receivers. And they added another piece later in the afternoon on Thursday. LSU added highly touted D lineman out of Florida, DeAnthony Lafayette. Does he say Lafayette or Lafayette? I mean, Louisiana, they say Lafayette. So however you say his name. If he's going to Baton Rouge, I guess they're going to call him Lafayette now. But it's LSU's second commitment of the day yesterday, and LSU now with 16 commitments. And I want to say they were like 11th. They had been booted out of the top 10 with all the recruiting movement in the last 2 weeks. And adding Lamar Brown moved them back up to 7th on the 24/7 Sports composite. I think On 3 has them 5th overall. But good news there for LSU fans that were really hoping to land Lamar Brown. Again, I think the 24/7 prediction, like the crystal ball earlier this week, was like 75% A&M. So there was a lot of people thinking he was going to end up at A&M. How about over at Tennessee, old Josh Heupel picking up Joel Combay, Combay, announcing he is heading to Rocky Top. Gave his verbal pledge this week, just one day after his teammate Braden Rouse jumped into the Vols 2026 class. So Combay is a DB. Braden Rouse, they both play for Marietta Kell High School there in Georgia. Combay is 6'1", 192 pounds, 3-star prospect, the number 49 safety in this class. And Josh Heupel, up to 20 verbal commits for the class of 2026. sitting there number 13 on the composite, so top 15 class for the Tennessee Vols. One more SEC note here on the basketball court. Former Florida guard Walter Clayton Jr. added to the trophy case. He was named the recipient of the Roy F. Kramer Award Wednesday morning, given annually to the top male and female athletes in the Southeastern Conference. The honor has been handed out to male athletes since 1976. Clayton becomes the sixth Gator to win the award. Although two Florida greats, Danny Werfel and Tim Tebow, won it twice. Ryan Lochte, Caleb Dressel, and Grant Holloway are the other Florida athletes to win that honor. But it means Clayton is the first men's basketball player to do so, and had an all-time great season for Florida, became the program's first ever consensus All-American, led the Gators to a national championship, averaged more than 18 points and 4 assists per game, and starting his pro career, went on to go 18th overall to the Utah Jazz in the NBA draft. So wish him the best of luck. But Walter Clayton Jr. named SEC Male Athlete of the Year. Well deserved. All right, when we return here on Locked On SEC, got some more rankings on SEC, kind of predicted order finish from our friends over at Locked On College Football. So we'll take a look at that here in just a second on Locked On SEC. Roll along here, Locked On SEC, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And our buddy Spencer McLaughlin over at Locked On College Football, he put out his rankings for all the different conferences across college football. Believe his predicted order finish, how he thinks everything's going to happen. By the way, we'll be at SEC Media Days next week. We'll bring you guys full coverage there. And I know the media will vote on predicted order finish, who they think is going to win the SEC and all that sort of thing. So let's take a look at Spencer's rankings here from our team over at Locked On College Football and see what they are thinking in terms of how the SEC is going to shape up. And here is what he has. Georgia at number 1. So I assume he has got the Georgia Bulldogs winning the SEC championship yet again. Over who? Number 2, he's got the Texas Longhorns. So Georgia 1 and Texas 2. Not very creative. That's how last season ended. Georgia beat Texas in Atlanta in Texas' first year in the SEC. So kind of a repeat from last year, which rarely happens. But that's how he sees it at the top. Coming in right behind it, Alabama number 3, LSU number 4. So your 4 best teams predicted here in the SEC would be Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and LSU. Now, I guess the assumption here would be those are going to be the 4 playoff teams. If the SEC is to get 4 teams in. Alabama plays LSU. They play in Tuscaloosa. Alabama plays Georgia. They got to play them in Athens. So you start to kind of do some deductive reasoning here. And then Texas plays Georgia in the regular season, but they don't play Alabama. They don't play LSU. So that's kind of how he has it playing out at the top. Behind LSU, he's got South Carolina number 5. So Lenore Sellers and company having a nice season. Oklahoma at 6. So he seems to be very high on the John Mateer, Ben Arbuckle addition there for Oklahoma. He's got Ole Miss at 7. I think part of that is schedule. Ole Miss has got a favorable schedule. Boston Simmons can settle in. Probably like an 8-4, 9-3 type season for Ole Miss. Not playoffs, but pretty good. Got Florida at 8. Florida's finishing 8th in the SEC. Again, they won some games that maybe people weren't predicted for them to win. They got a tough schedule. He's got A&M at 9. A little bit of a fall there for Mike Elko's bunch, who was leading the SEC 3/4 of the way into the season last year. Tennessee at 10. Yeah, I mean, again, the Joey Aguilar effect. How much do you believe in him at Tennessee? So maybe a little bit. He's not very high on Tennessee compared to others. Missouri at 11. That feels really low when you look at their schedule. I mean, Missouri avoids a lot of the top teams or predicted tougher teams in the SEC. So he must think that Bo Perbula is just going to suck and Ahmad Hardy's not going to be very good in the run game. I don't know. But Missouri at 11. He's got Auburn at 12, which is an improvement. But if you're finishing 12th in the SEC, I got to think you're in that 7-5, 6-6 range. 7-5 would be an improvement for Auburn, but I mean, are they throwing a parade for that? 6-6 would be a disappointment. But hey, according to Hugh Freeze, our goal is to make a bowl game. So I guess if he gets to 6-6, that's a bowl game. Rounding out the bottom four, he's got Vanderbilt going finishing 13th. It just feels so tough to say Vanderbilt's going to be one of the four worst teams in the SEC when they bring Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers back. But I get it. The conference is difficult. It's got Arkansas at 14. So if they're finishing 14th, that means likely the end of Sam Pittman in Fayetteville. And then he's got Mississippi State improving one slot from last year. He's got them finishing 15th and Kentucky 16th. So that means, man, it was a debacle of a season for Mark Stoops, and he probably didn't survive the year. So, again, that is the Locked On College Football Conference Rankings prediction for the SEC. Spencer McLaughlin and the guys over there at Locked On College Football. So if you agree, disagree, whatever, let us know in the comments. I actually don't think this is that bad. I could talk it out. I can talk out the reasoning on why. But, again, big buyer in Oklahoma, not so much a buyer in Tennessee or Missouri or Arkansas for that matter. All right, there you have it. That is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out The Portal Show. Brian Smith, he's got you caught up with all the latest rumors on recruiting and transfer portal and everything else. Be the most informed fan on all the changes on the college football landscape. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Chris Gordy. It's been Locked On SEC. We will talk to you guys next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll come to you from Atlanta next week. We'll have you covered with all the latest from SEC Media Days. Some special guests joining us throughout the week. You do not want to miss it. We'll talk to you guys then.